Hey everybody, it's great to see you today. Welcome to Living Power, your online Bible study where we are walking through the Bible in a year. Today is December 4th and we are living the life of Paul after his arrest in Jerusalem. Today we're reading about Acts 24 to 26. And yesterday the reading kind of left us at a cliffhanger because Paul has been arrested, he's been taken to Caesarea, and they were awaiting the accusers to get there because the trial couldn't start before the accusers got there. Well, today in the reading, the accusers get there and they bring an attorney with them. And the attorney's name is Tertullus. That's how I'm going to pronounce it. And we wanted to look at the charges that were brought against Paul. And today I'm going to tell you why those charges were politically significant for that date and time. And then we're going to look at his time that he was imprisoned there in Caesarea and the trials. There were actually two that he had during that 2-year period when he was under house arrest there in Caesarea. So the charges against Paul were 3. First, he is a troublemaker, they said. And he's disturbing the peace that you, oh wonderful governor, have worked so hard to establish here in this place. That was a political accusation because to Rome it was very, very important that they establish peace in all the provinces that they governed. So it was kind of a little jab, he's disturbing the peace. The second charge against Paul was that he was a ringleader of a cult. The Nazarenes is what they called this cult. They saw it as an invalid sect of Judaism, a branch off of Judaism, and they didn't recognize it at the time. This was politically charged. You can see why it would be religiously charged, but it was politically charged also because Rome didn't allow there to be other religions besides Judaism in this area. So this was a new religion that had popped up, and it was against the law. The third charge against Paul was that he had desecrated the temple. Now, he did not do that. He was not a troublemaker, and he does agree that he is part of the group of people that believe in Jesus and the resurrection. And he makes a point of describing the resurrection as part of the faith that this, what they call cult, believes in. We're going to talk about that at the end of the lesson today. Why was the resurrection such an important point for him to make? Why is the resurrection important to us as believers? Well, it's the whole basis of our religion, because if Jesus didn't rise again, then we're still under the power of death, and death still has a hold on us. And then the living power that we were promised in the scriptures couldn't come to enable us and transform us into new life in Christ. So this whole concept of believing in the resurrection and the fact that Jesus did rise again is critical and a key differentiator between Christianity and other religions. So this third charge against Paul was politically charged because Rome gave the Jews permission to execute Gentiles who went inside the temple. Remember we talked yesterday about there being barriers and walls and partitions, and the Pharisees, the Jews knew that this law was in effect. So this charge, however, was a trumped-up charge because when we read yesterday, might have been the day before, when the mob started to beat Paul right before he was seized and pretty much protected by the Romans, they didn't tell the Romans this charge. This charge was dreamed up in the last 24, 48 hours in the time that it took them to arrive in Caesarea. So this is a brand new charge that they made up out of nowhere. Acts 24:27 tells us that Paul was in prison for 2 years. It was a house arrest. His friends were allowed to come see him. They could bring him things. And during this first trial, they ask him, it's the governor of Judea now that's that's trying him. It's the successors, well, the successor to Pontius Pilate who tried Jesus. This is what we're talking about, the governor of the province of Judea. And they ask him, or he asks him, it's Felix, he asks him, do you want to be sent back to Jerusalem? And he says, no, I appeal to Caesar. Now, maybe he said that because Jesus had appeared to him in a vision and said, you're going to Rome. Maybe he said that in that moment prompted by the Spirit. We don't know why, but we do know that it was God's providential plan that he end up in Rome, and this was just all part of God's plans being carried out. 2 years later, he's still in Caesarea, and he has another court appearance. And we need to take a moment and talk about the three governors of Judea from a historical standpoint so that you understand who Felix is and who Festus is. When we talk about Pontius Pilate, I bet you recognize that name. But Felix took over for Pontius Pilate, and Festus took the job over for Felix. So here are the dates. Pontius Pilate was governor of Judea from 26 to 36 A.D. Felix was from 52 to 58 A.D. I don't know who was in between. And then Festus was 58 to 62. It is so interesting that all three of these Judean governors found either Jesus or Paul innocent. Isn't that interesting? They couldn't find any valid charge against the people. Festus had the problem now. See, Felix handled his first trial when Paul first got there. But now Festus is having to try him again, and Festus is the one that's having to determine now what in the world are we going to do with him. So he's like, well, Paul wants to be sent to Caesar. What charge do I write? You know, if you are a subordinate in the line of the Caesars, Nero, by the way, is the Caesar at this time, and I don't think they think he's crazy yet. But if you were in, kind of the line of, that's your direct reporting line, I guess, and you're sending this man up to Caesar with a note with your name on it. Dear Caesar, please try this man who's causing all this trouble in my province that I wasn't able to adequately rectify, and here's the charge against him. He couldn't very well say, oh, I couldn't find a charge against him. He would look incompetent. So that's the problem that Festus had. What charge do I write on the note that I send with Paul up to Caesar Nero? His conclusion was that Paul hadn't done anything wrong, and this was the problem. He even says, we could have let this guy go if he hadn't appealed to Caesar. But he's appealed to Caesar, he's a Roman citizen, and to Caesar he will go. The key theme to note in the reading today, I don't want you to miss it, it is so easily overlooked, is this concept of the belief in the resurrection. The Sadducees differed from the Pharisees, and anytime this came up between these two groups, there would be loud talking and just people would get all upset, all hot and bothered about it. The Sadducees did not believe in a resurrection. Jesus even corrected them during his time on earth. The Pharisees did believe in a resurrection. The Greeks didn't believe in the resurrection either, which is part of what's going on here behind the scenes, especially in the discourse that we read about today between Paul and who was it that he was talking to, and he said, are you trying to get me to convert to Christianity? Well, the reason there was that guy probably didn't believe in the resurrection. The Pharisees believed it, Jesus believed in the resurrection, and Paul believes in the resurrection. Paul is claiming that Jesus is alive, which, as we said earlier, is the foundation. It's a foundational point of Christianity, and it was a foundational point of his teaching. So the key here to remember is that believers must be resurrected at some future point in time in order to receive all of the blessings, the spiritual blessings, and the promises that God promised those who have faith in Him back from the Old Testament. This means that we must be resurrected to receive our full inheritance after we die. Same is true of the believers that came before us, and will be true of the Israelite people who come to faith in Jesus that come after us, because they have to be resurrected to receive the full promises that God has made to them as well. This concept of the resurrection is absolutely key, and it's something that we all need to look forward to, because it's the point at which we will receive our full inheritance as sons and daughters of God. And that is something that we have to look forward to. Well, tomorrow we're going to continue, and tomorrow's reading is exciting because they end up taking Paul, it's probably 59 AD, and they take Paul on a ship with many other people to Rome, and they have lots of trouble along the way. So as you read this, imagine yourself in this situation, and how in the world would you have handled these trials that happen on the way to Rome? Well, I hope you've enjoyed this lesson. We're going to continue tomorrow. I hope you'll be with me. Blessings to you and your family. Shalom.